get enough of Team Pete? Well, you've come to the right place, as each week I interview supporters of Pete Buttigieg, former candidate for President of the United States and current Secretary of Transportation. Hear their personal stories about why they became part of Team Pete and how they started a movement. Join us as we talk Pete, politics, and anything in between. Hi everyone, my name is Kim Ang and I am the host of this podcast, Talking with Team Pete, and today my guest is Barbara Nelson. Hi Barbara.
Hi.
Thanks for joining me today. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Good. So could you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became a part of Team Pete?
I'm from Portland, Oregon. I just live maybe about 15 miles out of the city. I started out, and I hate to admit this, but I started out as a Beto fan because I was so inspired by his run when he ran against Ted Cruz for the Senate. Mm-hmm. And then I met Pete. So the first time I heard Pete on TV, I thought, man, this guy is interesting. He's just different. He's not a typical politician. I really wanted to find out more information, and so I jumped online and I did a lot of research, and I came across a group called Barnstormers, and that was just life-changing. I just looked for more and more information about him, called a few of my friends and said, you've got to check this guy out. And pretty soon what happened is Bill Bagnall from Portland started PDX for Pete.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was able to contact
I just spoke to Bill.
And the rest is history. I mean, I just jumped in full on board, and it was an amazing experience.
So was Pete like your guy the minute you heard him, or did you kind of have to think about it a little more?
I was looking for a candidate that was inspirational, optimistic about the future. I think in politics we hear so much doom and gloom and disparaging the other, candidates, that it was very refreshing to have that inspiration. And that's what drew me initially to Beto O'Rourke, because, he has that same kind of optimism and drive and energy. But Pete, what drew me to him was his amazing calmness. His, obviously he's an intellect. He has a gift of communication like I've never seen in a candidate. I think he's a once-in-a-lifetime candidate. I wouldn't even call him a politician because he's just a really great communicator, and he listens. And so I was just drawn in. He's just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like the first time I heard him talk too, it was like, who is this guy and where has he been all my life? It's like, this is the kind of leader that I've been wanting my whole life, to have somebody who's, like you say, so positive and inspirational, and just captivates your attention when he speaks. This ability to communicate is above anything I've ever seen as well in politics. And I'm not a political person. I've never been before Pete came along, and so I don't follow politics at all. I vote, but that's the extent of it. So were you like that too? Were you kind of, or do you pay more attention to politics?
I would say I've always been somebody who paid attention to politics. I've voted in every presidential election since I've been eligible to vote. I started, kind of going and listening to presidents as they would come and visit our city back with Bill Clinton. and you know, would would get engaged and watch the debates. I'd watch both the Republican and the Democrat debates, and
Oh, wow.
yeah, just always felt engaged, but never to the point of knocking on doors, text banking, you know, flying to another city. I mean that, you know, my husband I think thought I'd lost my mind, but then. You know, I said, but you got to see this guy. And then he was fully on board. He says, no, you go, you have to do this. I think what is lacking in politics and has been for a long time is servant leaders. And,
Yes.
you know, the way Pete looked at the whole process, you know, is that he is a servant and we are basically, you know, the people that he serves. And that is why I think he had such a ability to listen, you know, with empathy. And
Yeah.
he just amazed me, you know, at every turn when people would show up at his rallies and protest and say some pretty ugly things. He listened. You know, he didn't kick them out. He didn't say, you know, punch them in the nose or whatever. He listened, and he
Yeah.
found, you know, he could really disable a person's anger, you know, very quickly, and almost really turn it back where they looked a little bit silly for having done
Yeah.
that. Um,
Yeah.
and I know, you know, many of my friends that were, you know, independent, maybe Republican leaning conservative, they looked at Pete and they said, hey, this is a guy I could get behind. So I saw that he would resonate across party lines with a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I still to this day think had he stayed in the race, I think he could have won. But you know,
Yeah.
we don't know what goes on. We don't know why things
Yeah.
happen the way they do. And
Yeah.
Joe Biden's, you know, doing an amazing job, especially in the last few weeks. So you know, I know Pete is the future, though. I do know that.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely, for sure. So when you were saying about traveling across the country and stuff, where did you go?
Well, the first place that I went to was at the Liberty and Justice Dinner in Iowa, Des Moines, Iowa. I'd never been to Iowa. Really hadn't been to that kind of Rust Belt area. And so my good friend and I, we hopped on a plane and we went there and we met up with the Barnstormers. We, you know, knocked on doors. I met, you know, another group of people from, I think it was Texas and Florida, and we all just went together to neighborhoods and we knocked on doors. And the people in Iowa are amazing. Maybe because they're a caucus state, maybe because they're the first to vote. I found the Iowans very engaged and very informed in politics, and really, you know, listening to every candidate and dissecting what they were saying. So I really loved Iowa and the people there. Iowa nice, I guess they say. And so we went to the LJ dinner, and that was so just incredibly inspiring that we flew back and got further engaged, my friend and I, we would do visibility events in Portland. I live, you know, about maybe 10 miles out of Portland, so I would do the farmers markets with some other people. We would, you know, do text banking, you know, all sorts of different things to kind of get Pete, you know, to get his name and visibility out there. Yeah.
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 And then from there, I went to Las Vegas. And again, we went down there with the purpose of knocking on doors. It was the week, I think, before they were set to to caucus in Vegas, and so I knocked on some doors there. The people in Nevada were a little less, how do I say, not as informed, I think, of who was running. So it really did make a difference, knocking on a door and talking about the candidate that I was supporting. And the way that we were kind of instructed, is not to be aggressive, to ask, who was in their top three, who they were considering. Have you considered Pete? Have you heard Pete? And then talking about the values and things that we like and what drew us to him. And so that was pretty fun to go down there. And then the week of the caucus in Iowa, I went back there for, I think it was 8 days, and spent an entire week going from, oh my goodness, from Ames to Winterset to Des Moines, all over Iowa.
All over Iowa?
Yeah.
Wow.
In the snow.
Amazing.
Walking in the snow.
Oh my
and
gosh.
we were knocking on doors. We were given a list every day, and we would just, actually I did most of it by myself. There were only a couple days I had a partner with me to do that.
Oh, wow.
But people were amazing. And they would invite me in and say, have some hot chocolate. You're cold out there. I said,
wow.
no, I'm good. So, and then of
that's
course
so nice.
we went to the event, when Pete won Iowa. I want to say that again. He won Iowa.
Yes,
But went
you
to the
did.
event, and that was just very inspiring. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I can't imagine the energy in that room that
It was
night,
amazing.
I mean,
Yeah. It was really amazing.
Wow.
And I did get to the first, when I flew in, and I'd been on a red eye from Portland, and immediately went to work knocking on doors, and then I found out that he was going to be speaking in town hall. So I drove to Indianola, and I had not slept. I was still in the same clothes. I flew, and I go to this
Oh my God.
town hall, and I get there early, so I'm like right in the front row, and I really didn't anticipate him coming around and meeting us, and I was so amazed to be able to meet him, but a little embarrassed that I looked a little worse for the wear. But that's okay. I got to meet him, and I got to meet Chasten, and that was amazing.
Oh, nice, nice. So was that the only time that you got to meet him?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So was he everything you imagined him to
Yes, very much so. I did attend another town hall, but was more in the back of the crowd. And but yeah, he was very engaging, as a older person, where he could be my son. The first thing, I didn't know what to say, and I looked at him and I said, I hope you're taking care of yourself. I hope you're eating right and taking care of yourself, because I know the campaign trail can be absolutely exhausting. And he says, yes, I am, and then I think he had a bodyguard with him, and she said, would you like your picture? And I said, oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. So I treasure that. But I don't see him as a celebrity. I see him as a real person, who is like all of us. We can make mistakes. We're fallible, but he's a humble person. And that was the other thing that drew me to him, was his humility, his ability to admit if he made a mistake and try to see what he could do to correct it. And I think that is so refreshing in politics. It's everybody's so quick to kind of point the finger at somebody else and not accept responsibility. And Pete was the exact opposite.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I remember watching that video of him when there was that police shooting in South Bend, and he had to stop his campaign. And did you ever see that, the press conference?
Oh,
that
yeah.
was?
Yeah,
and that was brutal just to watch.
He walked into the fire. I mean, he really it was tough to watch, and I
Yeah.
don't think, you know, he didn't try to make excuses, and he didn't try to,
Yeah.
you know, he wasn't there to try to deflect people. I think what he wanted to do was to let them vent and
Yeah.
get out what they needed to say. Yeah.
Right. Right. And I think that's part of the healing is just to be able to be heard. And I felt like he, even though it was really hard to watch him just being yelled at and just taking it all in, and I felt like he was taking in their anger and their grief and just absorbing it so that they feel less grief
Oh,
and
yeah.
heartache.
Absolutely. And he did,
Yeah.
at one time on the debate stage, I know, you know, he had a question, a tough question about how it was handled, that
Yeah.
and an earlier incident with the police in South Bend. And I think
Yeah.
he was honest. You know, they said, "Why didn't you do this?" And he says, "Because I couldn't get it done." And
Yeah.
I think as human beings, we can understand that because in my own life, you know, I run a business, and in my own life, there's times where I might have the highest of aspirations to get something done or do something, but I can't. You know, it just isn't, you know, for whatever reason, and you have to admit, you know, I didn't get it done. I failed. I missed the mark this time, but I'm still trying. And I think that's the important thing.
Yeah, that sense of humility was just so authentic in him, and that's one of the things I appreciate about him as well. Yeah. So through all your volunteering, what was your biggest takeaway, or what did you enjoy the most out of it, out of that
Oh, I'm
experience?
sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, so out of all of your volunteering, what was the biggest takeaway, and what did you take away from that experience?
Oh gosh. I think the biggest takeaway for me is that yes, I'm just one person, but one person magnified, you know, the people really do have all the power. And I think when I actually got boots on the ground, when I actually went out there and met face to face, I found that we can make a difference. You know, we tend to think that, you know, now with, especially with technology, I think we tend to think that we're not going to make that impact, and why should I take the time to knock on a door or make a phone call? But it really does impact people. You know, I've always said if we could collectively, you know, all the people in our country, particularly, you know, the left-leaning folks in our country, if we could harness that energy that we have together, we can change this world. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind. I think there's a lot of cynicism among people because they watch, you know, they'll say, "Oh, that's politics." And
Yeah.
one thing Pete used to repeat over and over is politics is personal. Yesterday, when Joe Biden announced, you know, he was going to do the $10,000 student debt forgiveness, that's personal to me. My daughter is paying off
Yeah.
a student loan. I was thrilled to hear about that because it personally
Yeah.
affected my family. And
Yeah. And millions of
and
others.
millions of others. And
Yeah.
it's going to make the difference between somebody maybe buying a home or starting a business. That's personal. And I think we get so mired in the, you know, what we see on TV and this sensational news, you know, story. And we forget that we can make a difference. And you know, I know that my friends and my family, you know, they're probably super tired of me talking about Pete and, but, you know, I truly believe the one thing he did is he inspired, you know, really hundreds of thousands of people. His, you know, I think, in fact, my friends and I were planning to go up to Seattle, and unfortunately he suspended his campaign like the week before. But we were going to be going up to Seattle and driving up there to see him. And his events were growing exponentially.
Yeah.
I think one of the last ones was in Denver, Colorado, and it was huge. The excitement, when you see that excitement on the ground, you know, that candidate is, I mean, they're making great strides, and I saw that. What was really funny is when I was in Iowa, I'm talking to my husband every night, and it was about 3 days before the caucus. And he goes, you know, I hate to tell you, I'm watching TV, and, you know, Pete's like in third or fourth place. You know, I know you think he's going to win Iowa. But he said, I just hate to tell you, I don't think it's going to happen, and I don't want you to be disappointed. And I looked, you know, I said, no. I said, I know what's going on. I'm on the ground. I hear it. I see the energy. He's winning Iowa. And my husband just kept trying to, you know, don't be disappointed. And he did. I was one of the caucus greeters at one of the events, or I don't know, I guess a caucus area. And as people came in, I would ask them, you know, do you plan to vote for Pete? And they'd say yes, and I would hand them a sticker. And the guy, you know, there were two other people around me who were representing another candidate, and I almost felt bad because everybody coming in is like, oh, I love Pete. And I knew it. I knew that energy was there and excitement. So it didn't surprise me. It kind of surprised the media. It certainly surprised Bernie Sanders. But it wasn't a surprise because I saw it firsthand.
Yeah, I know, and I feel like the media was just saying things, and what was being reported on the ground was completely different, and so you just can never trust the news anyway. But
I think polls. You know, polls are interesting. I mean, you know, if you talk to people, I've had a lot of people say, well, no one's ever called me, you know, and do they call landlines?
Exactly.
Do they call cell phones? Do they, you know, how are these conducted?
Yeah.
So,
Right.
yeah.
Did your family kind of, were they all like voting age and like your kids, and did you try to convince them to vote for Pete, or any of your friends you try to convert?
No, well, we weren't able to vote for Pete or he suspended his campaign before we voted in Oregon. But yes, absolutely, every one of them would have voted for Pete. You know,
Oh, that's nice.
they attended, my husband went to visibility events with me. My daughter, you know, and my son-in-law who works with me, you know, constantly heard about Pete. And you know, it's not a hard sell. I mean, once you introduced him to somebody and you said, hey, take a listen, he sold himself. I mean, I didn't have to do arm twisting and convincing. You know, I do have a few Republicans in my family, and, you know, nothing probably would have convinced them, but that's okay. You know, that is, again, I don't think it's my job to convince somebody who to vote for. It's my job to tell them why I'm voting for that person and why, you know, I feel they're the best candidate. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of all you can do, right? Is just to show. And I felt like my obsession with Pete during that time was, there are certain times when I felt it was getting out of control, and so I had to kind of pull back a little bit. And like on my Facebook, I have to realize, okay, I'm posting way too many things about Pete. But the interesting thing is that I was just telling people how great he is and all this stuff. And at the end, when when the primary was over, I had a few people tell me, I was going to vote for Pete because of what you shared. And so I thought, oh, that's good to know.
I absolutely understand what you're saying. I tried to be very, well, for one, the one thing that the campaign, and I'm sure this came down from the top, directly from Pete, is, the rules of the road. That we don't argue with people. We don't try to strong arm and convince people. We don't tell them their candidate is the wrong person. Right. And we don't even really get into discussions of, we just don't want to be combative, I guess. And so, again, I just kept putting things out there of, hey, did you hear this? This is what Pete said. I agree with this. And it was interesting because I heard from people, my goodness, that I had, a cousin in Salt Lake City, and she, messaged me and says, oh my gosh, I saw that you're working on the Pete campaign, as a volunteer. I'm so impressed. We love Pete. And my ex-in-laws in Pennsylvania. And I was starting to hear from people I hadn't talked to in so long, clients of mine that would say, oh my gosh, I saw your Facebook and we love Pete. And that's really what I kept hearing. So just putting it out there, like, hey, here I am I'm at the Beaverton Farmers Market this weekend, and we had our stand-up Pete and our, everything, our blue and yellow on, and people would see that. And then I would go out and run into people, and they'd say, oh yeah, you're with Pete, that's awesome. So I got so much positive feedback. I can't even think, I don't think I had one person that said, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're, voting for that guy or supporting him. Some people would say, he's too young. I mean, he doesn't have the experience, or he's a gay man, They would say, and I would say, well, would that prevent you from voting? Oh, no, not me. I said, well, then why are you different than everyone else? Why do you think someone else, but you don't see those things as, stopping you from supporting him? And they say, oh, yeah. And I think that we forget that our country is moving, in a direction. The younger generations are changing this world. The Gen Z is so exciting to me. I think they're energized, and it's very smart. And I see them, and their parents are listening to them. And so I see things changing and moving in a direction. I have Republican friends, and they don't care who someone chooses to love. They don't care. I mean, they care about, the things that are going to affect their family. And so, I truly believe, I hope Pete does run again. Of course, that'll be up to him, and if he does, though, I told my husband, I said, I'm all in at that point. I will be probably taking a leave of absence or something, and, crisscrossing around the country. And I would be, to me, it would be an enormous, it would be wonderful to do that again.
Yeah. Me too. I wholeheartedly agree. And if he runs again, and I'm sure he will, because we definitely need a leader like him now.
So you worked in California then for Pete?
Yeah. So I volunteered, or I went to a volunteer orientation with the Silicon Valley group, and then from there from there, they just said, okay, you guys can, do whatever you want. So my partner and I set up a table at the farmer's market, at our local farmer's market every Sunday, and we would hand out flyers and whatever stuff we had on Pete. And just having that conversation with people is so enlightening to me, because I am an introvert, and so the idea of having to talk to people and talk to strangers is not something I'm comfortable with. But I found it a little easier at the farmer's market, because you have your table, and people, if they want, they can come to you, so you're not having to pressure people. And so if they come by and they're like, hey, who's this Pete guy? And then, we just tell them about Pete and why we support him and stuff. And
that's cool.
It was, and it's something like you. I've never done anything like this before. And it was just one of those things where when you have a candidate of that caliber that you believe in so much, everything he stands for is what I believe in. And so it's so easy just to go out there and work hard for him.
Did
and
you find,
I feel like everybody did.
When I started doing the farmers market events, I remember the first one, probably 1 out of 10 people would say, oh yeah, I know that guy. And 9 of them go, who's Pete? Who is this guy? By the time I finished doing the last farmer's market I did, I would say 9 out of 10 people knew him. There might be one that came by and said, who's this guy? But everybody, and I would say most of the comments were, I love that guy. He's so smart. It just, I kept hearing nothing but positive. But the evolution from being somebody relatively unknown to, oh yeah, I know this guy, he's great. It was really astounding, which speaks to how well run a campaign, that, what they did was, really short of a miracle, taking a small town mayor, and I live in a town that is about the same size as South Bend, Hillsboro, Oregon. So they took a small town mayor from, relatively unknown to on the national stage to winning Iowa and getting second in New Hampshire. I'm sure that rankled a few feathers in the political world, but I saw it as, holy cow, if this guy can run this well of a campaign, just think what he could do as president,
Right.
So, I hope he is in the future. I hope that we have another opportunity to support him and put him in the White House. I know he's busy and has a lot on his plate, so that'll be a decision he and Chasten have to make.
I feel like when that happens again, there's going to be even more energy for his campaign, because so many people know who he is now on the national level, and I just love the exposure that he's getting in his position. And there were people who are now saying, oh yeah, I misjudged him, and I didn't realize how great he is, and now they're seeing what we saw in him from the beginning, and so it's like,
I think it's nice. He had the momentum, and I know in anything in life, even if you're starting to exercise, it's all about consistency and momentum. And he had that momentum. But, there was a lot going on. I also think that we could not possibly, this country could not handle another 4 years of a Donald Trump. And that, at all costs, that needed to be prevented. And I think that Pete, he is a team player. He is a soldier. He's a servant leader. And if he feels, he would always put the country's needs before his own. And that is the type of leader we need, is somebody that says, wow, I think it's my time. I really know that I would do a great job, and I could probably win this thing, but what if, I need to put the country's needs first. And
Yeah.
so I think that, you know, he'll be back in some form. I mean, I hope someday I will be saying President Pete, President Mayor Pete. But yeah, hope so.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that Biden is going to run again?
Um, I don't know. I think he's in a very, before the midterms, I just think he can't, you know,
Say
really
anything
commit
yet?
to
Yeah.
anything one way or the other.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
my personal preference, I think he's been an amazing transitional president. But my honest feeling is I would like to see the older generation in the Senate, president, representatives. I'd like to see them pass the torch on to the
Yeah.
younger generations. That's my personal preference. I'm of that older generation. I'm 63, so I'm not, it's nothing against, older people. I just feel that when you get to a certain age, you don't have the energy level you do. You just don't. I think Joe Biden, again, he's done a lot of amazing things, and I don't think he gets the credit. I really don't think he gets
Yeah.
credit. The
Yeah.
other thing that Joe did, which speaks well of a leader, is he chose his cabinet well. And of course, Pete, being the Secretary of Transportation, was, a really, really great. I mean, whoever thought we'd be following the Secretary of Transportation and listening to, because I never even knew who they were before, except the last one,
Yeah, I
because,
know. I
yeah.
know, right?
But yeah, I think Joe put key people in key roles that have helped him, and it's helped him so he could do the other things he needed to do to get this country, moving again in the right direction.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he's been a good president. I'm completely biased. I would love to see Pete, run. I would love to see a woman, in the White House too. But to me, it's not about it has to be a woman. It has to be the
Yeah.
right person for that job.
Right
Yeah.
person. Yeah, exactly. The right person at the right time. Yeah. So, I know it's just, I feel like, yeah, like you said, Biden hasn't been given enough credit for what he's been able to achieve. And I think because he's been so low key that people just kind of dismiss him, whereas, with the former guy, every day was like a drama
Oh,
that we can get away
it's
from.
still a
And
drama.
so it's still a drama, exactly. It's like, oh gosh. Yeah. Um, well, since you follow politics so closely, I mean, do you feel like there's like a shift happening
Yes.
with what the Republicans are doing and all these crazy extremism? I feel like, people are waking up and realizing, okay, enough is enough. This is just crazy.
I do think in some respects they overplayed their hand. And I feel, certainly with Roe v. Wade, that has inspired a lot of people, male and female, to
Yeah.
get more engaged and to realize I don't think anybody thought that could happen. I think that 8 years of Barack Obama, no drama Obama, made us a little complacent. And I think we could go about our
Yes.
lives and not worry because there was an adult in charge. I think
Right.
Donald Trump, I think it took a lot of us by surprise how he, moved through the Republican Party up to the top to be the one that they chose, and you know that he was able to, you know, to win in 2016. And I, you know, I'll never ever forget how I felt the day after. I think I cried for 3 days, and I thought, how did this happen? Well, we were asleep at the wheel. You know, we were really asleep at the wheel, and I vow to never let that happen again. You know, I will be as active as I have to be. I have grandkids, you know, this is their future. And I think that we do see a shift growing because, you know, they've been very outspoken, and now I think they've overplayed their cards a little bit. If you're watching any of the primaries, the Trump supporting kind of crazy QAnon people are winning, but are they going to be able to win in a general election? And I don't think so. And I think it's very, very possible that we will gain a couple more seats in the Senate and possibly hold on to the House. And that is so exciting because if that happens, the next 2 years are going to be amazing, really amazing. But I know, you know, I definitely have been supporting, Beto O'Rourke. I would love to see him, you know, be the governor of Texas. But I'm supporting, you know, Val Demings in Florida, John Fetterman in Pennsylvania, you know, some of those races that are going to put us over the top. And, you know, and I never thought, you know, prior to Trump, I don't think I would have even known who was running in these other states. So he's, you know, I guess somebody asked me one time, they said, say something nice about Trump. And I said, okay, he's engaged me to be way more active in politics than I ever would have. So I think he did light a fire under people. And, you know, I think the biggest thing we have to do is just prevent that segment of the Republican Party from getting any, you know, any leeway. It just, it can't happen.
I mean, with the loss of Liz Cheney, with her loss, I mean, she's already vowed that she would try to make sure that none of those actors will get elected, and so she's putting her weight behind, you know, all the other candidates who actually believe in democracy. And for a while there, I was kind of worried too with all these extreme candidates and their winning primaries, and I was thinking, oh my God, where is this country going to go if they win? And then I kind of had to sit back a little bit and think, okay, well, actually, it's a good thing because then Democrats will look more sane and normal and versus these crazies. And so, and especially with the Roe decision, like you said, it's galvanized, you know, more voters, especially young voters. And so hopefully that anger can transform into, you know, what happens in November.
I have a friend whose daughter votes straight Republican, but you know, and I can't remember what state it was, but there was a state they were talking about, basically, you know, getting rid of birth control, and you know, that was the line for her. She said, oh my gosh, you know, are you kidding me? I mean, and that is the thing. I think when they overplay their hand, whether it's Roe v. Wade, whether it's, you know, especially, you know, forcing young 13-year-old girls who were raped, you know, to forcing them to give birth, when they talk about Marriage Equality Act, you know, everybody pretty much either works with somebody, has a family member who is gay. I mean, and these are human beings. These are people we know. These are our friends, our family. And so it's not I mean, when they start overreaching like that, I think they're going to lose so many in their own party. And so as painful as it's been to watch the decisions come down from the Supreme Court, maybe that's what needed to happen in order for our party to get engaged enough to get out there and really make a difference. I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember reading something where the writer said, Trump didn't destroy the Republican Party. He just kind of revealed them as to who they are. And I feel like that is such a good point because, all these agendas that they have underneath it all, this is what they wanted to do. And now they're realizing, oh, shoot, like you say, we overplayed our hand and people are mad and it's going to translate into us losing if we keep this up.
There's a movie, I'm trying to think of the name of it. It was a movie about the race when John McCain, and Sarah Palin were running. And John McCain, he knew that there was an underbelly of the Republican Party, going back to George Wallace and some really, kind of crazy part of that party. And he said, if we ever, placate these people, if we ever cater to these people, we're in big trouble. And unfortunately, when he aligned himself with Sarah Palin, he didn't realize that she was part of that. And she opened that door. I know in retrospect, he realized that was a big mistake. But I think what happened is that, that segment of the party got more and more angry. I don't know, and it grew. But I think one thing that Pete was really great at explaining, and especially on Fox News, he knew he had to go on Fox News because if he's not talking to people, they're hearing a whole different story. And if he's not out there on Fox News, they're never going to hear his message. And I think he realized that, these are Americans too. We may say, hey, you're crazy and that isn't reality and that's not what is happening, but that's their reality. And I think what Pete said is, hey, we've got to listen to these people. Now, we don't have to agree with them. We don't even have to, we can tell them they're wrong in their thinking. But, we cannot ignore them and just say, hey, that's crazy, or whatever. And, I think that's where he resonated with so many people is he didn't demean somebody to find that common ground, although he never compromised his values. And that is a hard thing to do. But he's, he's an exceptional person and an exceptional politician.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I remember, all the slack that he received about going on Fox News and talking to them. And I'm thinking, like he said, if we don't go to where people are, how are they going to hear our message? And I felt like with Elizabeth Warren or Kamala Harris and how they thought, well, they would never go on Fox News and stuff like that. And I thought, well, that's being a little egotistical. You got to show a little more humility. If you want people to vote, you have to convince them of what kind of leader you would be for them.
Absolutely.
And so,
if the other thing that Pete used to always say is, when I'm president of all Americans, not just Americans that watch MSNBC or CNN or network news. You know, and that's where I think um, it's so, you know, divisive politics is saying, you know, I'll speak to this group, but I'm not going to speak to this group because they don't agree with me. And I think, you
Yeah.
know, finding
Yeah.
that bridge. I mean, you know, the fact that his logo was a bridge, you know, in South Bend spoke
Yeah.
volumes because he's a bridge builder. And, um, you know, even his plan that he had to expand the Supreme Court, which, by the way, he was the only candidate to bring it up, which is now obviously a hot topic. And that's
Right.
where I think he's so insightful. But his plan to expand the Supreme Court wasn't, let's expand it with a whole bunch of leaning judges.
Right.
He's like,
Right.
yeah, let's have, and I can't remember, I think it was 10 appointed, 5 by Republican president, 5 by Democrat, and the initial, the
Right.
remaining 5 would have to be agreed upon by all 10. And to me,
Right.
that makes a
Right.
fair and just court. And,
Yes.
you know, even now, I know I hear people saying, we need to expand, we need 2 more liberal justices on there. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, what we need
Yeah.
is a
No.
court that follows the law, you know, and does not have a political agenda. And he saw that, you know, way before anybody, it was popular to talk about. Um, and so those type of things that he brought up, the national public service, and he talked about how when he was in the military, you know, he said we were there to do a job. And so it didn't matter if you were gay, black, white, woman, male, you know, it didn't
Yeah.
matter because we were all there for one purpose. And it brought them
Right.
together. And, you know, so he,
And you're on the same team.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I again, I hope these things happen one day. I really do.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like what you just explained there just shows how such a visionary thinker he is and a deep thinker, and how he's able to see the big picture and then at the same time can see all the little intricate details and to make sure that the pieces work together and all that stuff. Yeah, it's just fascinating. I wish there was a way to like look into his brain
Yeah.
and see how he thinks.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think he's,
that
you know, he appears to be somebody who is thoughtful. I mean, he can obviously think on his feet, and it, you know, can come up with amazing comebacks that isn't putting somebody down. I'm like, how did he, you know, wish I was that quick
know.
on my feet. But he also, I think, is, you know, reflective. And I think he's somebody that probably, you know, really deliberates and thinks about, like, when he put together his platform of what he stood for and the rules of the road, how he broke it down into all these different traits and what it meant personally to him and his campaign. And when somebody takes the time, and I believe he did that himself, I don't believe he had handlers, you know,
yeah,
handing him a
yeah.
speech or handing him a platform. You know, it was him, and he came up with this. And, you know, to me that's inspirational, and that is the type of person. Again, I think, you know, they come along once or twice in a lifetime, and if we're lucky enough, we realize that and we elect them. You know, so hopefully we'll have another chance.
Yeah, I felt this complete letdown when he announced that he was withdrawing, and I don't know about you, but I remember just crying throughout his whole entire speech, listening to it, and part of me felt like, you know, this country, why, you know, why did we miss out on electing this amazing leader that we could have, and just I just felt so sad for the country in that moment, and
I
just
was
the loss.
actually the day that he suspended his campaign, myself and two other Pete supporters, we went downtown to the Women's March in Portland. And we had our Pete gear, we had our signs, and we were marching, along with the women. And we stopped for lunch on the way home. And of course, next thing I know, my phone is just going nuts. And I said, boy, somebody, somebody's trying to get a hold of me. It was just bing, bing, bing. And I look on it, and it's just message after message after message that Pete Buttigieg, suspends his campaign. And we all sat there in just stunned silence. We looked at each other, and then the tears just started rolling down our eyes. And we felt, just a gut punch, just like, no, this can't be. But when Pete, it took a week or so for me to just go, okay, get over yourself, if Pete made this decision, you've trusted him up to this point, trust him. And then he came out, of course, for Biden. And so our Barnstormer group, Julie Parker, Bill Bagnall, all of us immediately, we took our yellow and blue off and we put our red, white, and blue on for Joe, and we got United for Biden signs, and we did visibility events, and we knew that was a way to honor Pete, to honor what he had done and the change he made in all of us. So we did that, and thank goodness we did.
Yeah, I think him stepping down and then endorsing Biden was like the turning point for him, and that really catapulted him to win all the general election and be the nominee.
Well, and Pete, I think being a leader, the one thing I saw with him is he really was the first top tier candidate to step down and throw his weight behind Biden, which then gave Amy Klobuchar the permission, Elizabeth Warren, it kind of snowballed from there. And then I think Bernie, finally said, oh, okay, Bernie, I tell you.
Bernie.
I know. I have a love-hate relationship with that man. I think he's did some amazing things over the years, but I feel like, Bernie, your time is up. You've run how many times, and you're kind of a disruptor. And, again, I think we just need some new energetic faces in the mix. Pete, of course, is my number one. Mallory McMorrow is amazing. From I think Michigan. Val Demings. I mean, there's some amazing candidates out there.
It's definitely time to pass the torch. And then that's one of the things about the Democratic Party is that, like with Bernie and how he was so reluctant to just throw his ad in for Joe at the end. It was like, and that's the difference between them and Pete, right? Because he's such a team player that he knows the stakes, and the whole point is to get this former guy out of office. That is the goal, and we're all on the same team, and yet everybody just seems to keep bickering with each other and grandstanding, and it's just, why are we doing this?
There's a lot of ego in
politics,
I think. I see it on the local level. Where I live, there's just a lot of ego, grandstanding, and then every now and then somebody comes along who doesn't have the ego, and the other politicians don't know what to do with that person, and they take jabs at them, and they try to, cut them down, and it doesn't work because they're not affected by that. And I saw that, with Elizabeth Warren when she attacked Pete for having fundraisers, in wine caves.
Oh yeah, the wine cave.
Which I think he had one in Napa Valley. But,
right.
then she went on to do the same thing and take, money from
Yeah.
big donors or
Big
whatever.
donors.
And
Yeah.
I found it really, when Pete, I know at one point he was on the stage and he says, I am literally the only guy up here who's not a millionaire. I have a mortgage, I have student loans, and yet they were jabbing him, as Wall Street Pete. And I found that so ironic.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
seriously.
I
But
know.
again,
Yeah.
in politics, it's all, it's unfortunate that so many of them, it's all about sound bites and
Yeah.
what 3-letter phrase can you have that will
Right.
resonate with low information people, because that's all they're
Right.
going to hear.
Right.
And to
Right.
me, does that serve the American people? Does that serve our country?
No.
No.
Yeah.
It's
No,
self-serving.
not at all.
And that's
Yeah.
what I saw is Pete was not willing to be self-serving. He was willing to do whatever was right for us. And I still probably harbor a little resentment towards some of the things that some of the other candidates, said to him
Yeah.
or about him.
Yeah.
But I know politics is kind of like mud wrestling, Yeah. And the thing
Yeah.
with Pete
You just
is
want to
like he
stand
wasn't
out.
willing to jump in the
Yeah.
mud with them, and it drove him crazy.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. He wasn't willing to go down that path and be negative and. Yeah, and yeah, that whole thing about him working at McKinsey and calling him corporate P,
Oh,
you're a
no.
corporate hack, and all this stuff, and I'm thinking, he graduated from college. That was his first job as a little lowly guy on the totem pole, and you think he has the ability to change bread prices in Canada?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the accusations are just so insane. I mean, it's not even logical.
No, again, I think it says something about somebody's character when they know in their own heart, Elizabeth Warren clearly knew that Pete, wasn't in bed with Wall
Yeah.
Street, wasn't
Yeah.
didn't have all these big donors that he was going to pay back at some point. She
Yeah.
knew that,
Yeah.
and it was, to me, it was just, and I think that's what a career politician, that's all they know. That's what they know. And yes, it can work, but for
Yeah.
who? Does it work for American people?
Yeah.
Does it work for our country? Does it work for the world? No. It might work for that individual. And so,
Right.
Again, like Elizabeth Warren, I think she's done some amazing things, and I think she's been a good fighter, for the average guy out there. But she kind of lost me when she went low and decided
Yeah.
to do that. I just thought, man, it's not worth it. If that's how you have to run
Yeah.
your campaign, it's not worth winning. It just isn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I remember Pete saying, like, this isn't an election that's, if it's worth winning, then yeah. But if you're going to win just because of your name or how much money you raise and all that stuff, it's
Yeah.
that's not what it's about.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's just sad that we're constantly raising the bar on him.
Yeah.
And so, the things that they've done in the past was okay, but now suddenly it's not okay for Pete. It's like,
Right. And he was given, in some of the debates, the commentators were giving Pete opportunities to throw jabs back in, and I know there
Yeah.
was a question at one time, I think it had to do with Hunter Biden or something with Joe, and Pete just said, no, that's off limits, you don't know. Joe Biden should be judged for who Joe Biden is, his record, what he did as a senator all those years. And, you know, when he was given an opportunity to kind of pounce on his opponent, he didn't do it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I respected that.
Mhm.
You know, so I think he elevated the conversation. I think has the way he's done his job as Secretary of Transportation, he has elevated the communication. I mean, I never can even remember hearing or seeing a Secretary of Transportation on TV, you know, and
Mhm.
he's out there all the time,
Right.
and but that's who he is, you know.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I call him Joe Biden's secret weapon because I think he is the best advocate for that administration because he does go on Fox and yes, he talks about the airlines and infrastructure and things he's doing, but he also ventures into other things that Joe's doing and he's able to articulate it to Fox viewers in a way that they can go, oh, yeah, now that makes sense. Yeah, that helps my family. So I do
Mhm.
think that he's an amazing communicator, probably the
Yeah.
best in the business that I can see.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's nice to see that other people on social media are finally seeing that part of him
Hmm.
that we saw too. Yeah, and I feel like every time he's on TV, he's such a team player, and he always promotes what the administration has accomplished. You know, whereas other Democrats would come on and they would, complain about why Biden isn't doing enough
Yeah,
and that sort of thing. And it's just like, why are you doing that? Why?
yeah,
What is that? What good does that do?
yeah.
Oh,
It's
sad.
he's just I don't know. You know, he's a different sort of politician that I've ever seen in my lifetime. Um,
Yeah.
and he just doesn't, I think he has enough self confidence, not cocky confidence, but enough
Yeah.
self confidence to know that he doesn't have to tear another person down to build himself up. That he
Hmm.
can just run on his own values and his own
Yeah.
experience. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Definitely an inspiration to us all.
Yes.
Oh. All right. Well, I think our time is up here. So I really appreciate you talking to me today. Thank you for your time and sharing your story and your insights into politics that I'm usually not a part of, but it's nice to hear your
Well,
side. And
thank you for doing this
yeah,
podcast. I think
yeah,
what's so amazing is how many lives that Pete has touched.
yeah,
We have some people in Portland that do podcasts and, you know, do a lot, talk about Pete. And, you know, I know there's some books that have been written from some of the barnstormers and some of the people involved in his campaign. And I think it speaks well of a person that he's touched so many lives in a positive way. And what you're
yeah.
doing is amazing. And you know, let's hope that in a few years here we'll be back on the campaign trail and wearing that yellow and blue and you know
Yeah, exactly. The gold and
or
blue.
golden
I love
blue. Yeah,
seeing I love seeing that sea of gold in Iowa. It was so amazing. Just
yeah,
lifted my spirits. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, our stories are what bring us together, right? What connect us,
yes,
and so that was my goal of this podcast is to hear people's stories because I love hearing people's stories and what inspired them. What was it about this guy that made them do things that they normally wouldn't do?
yeah. Well, and that's the one thing
Yeah.
I continue to hear, no matter who I talk to from all over the country, is
Hmm.
everybody'd say, I've never done this before. I have
Hmm.
never, you know,
Hmm.
and again, I think some people thought I'd lost my mind, you know, but it, and it's not, you know, the funny thing is I explain to people, it's not the same as a cult or what, following a cult leader,
Yeah.
because I can tell you,
Yeah.
if Pete did something contrary to what his values are, I'd be the first person to call him out. All of us would be. We'd say, hey, Pete,
Yeah.
whoa, wait a minute. This is not what you
Yeah.
have talked to us about. If this isn't
Yeah.
what, the standard you hold us to. So, hey, we're holding you to the same standard. And I think that's the difference. And so, yeah, it was probably one of the best experiences of my life. And I have
Yeah.
lots of pictures and memories and everything, but I really want to repeat this and get out there on the campaign
Yeah,
trail
me
again.
too. Me too. Me too. That was. I completely agree with what you said. It's one of those great experiences of my life as well,
Yeah.
and something that I thought I would never do, but there I was, and then just meeting everybody through this process was just so amazing. I feel like I have a new set of family now, with all the people that I've met and the contacts that we continue to keep in touch with each other.
Yeah.
And like meeting you today through this and hearing your story, I feel connected to you through our Pete story, and
Me too.
it just makes me feel so joyous inside. So thank you for joining me today. And
Well, thank you.
if you've enjoyed this conversation, please be sure to subscribe so this channel can grow and I'll be able to share more stories with you each week. Thank you for listening.